Hi, I'm Catherine from the Port Orange Regional Library. This video is the first in our local author talks, and today I'm lucky enough to have Dan Smith, author of I Swear the Snook Drowned. Dan's been fishing Volusia County waters for more than 40 years now and has lots and lots of tales. Dan writes a column in the Hometown News called Fishing with Dan, and I can attest that it's filled with as much humor as it is knowledge. I'm looking forward to this conversation today, Dan.
Hi, I'm happy to be here, and thank you. And the book was written quite a few years ago, but it still holds up. And it's although I write a fishing column, there was some adventure stories that I had stored away that weren't perfect for that column. Well, let me read you the foreword to the book, if I may. The foreword will tell you a little bit about who I am and about what the book is about. For nearly 15 years now, I have been imparting my fishing and boating wisdom through a column in the weekly Hometown News. Thankfully, the readers have been receptive and surprisingly enthusiastic. From the beginning, I promised the readers and myself that I would not be a shill for the bait shops and the guides, as all of the other outdoor writers had been. I would not sit in front of the computer screen and call these guys to ask if the fish were biting. I always liken that to asking an umbrella salesman if he thought it might rain. If I was going to do that, I would do it my way. Stow the bull and write truthful and instructive stuff. In other words, I would do the kind of column that I would want to read. In that respect, I guess I have done a pretty fair job. Wherever I go, people stop me to praise my work, and lots of respected old fishermen have lauded my efforts. I'm a senior citizen now and have gained a lot of experience fishing in Volusia County and a good portion of the state of Florida for over 50 years, actually. Much of that experience came at a cost. In the years since I rented the first boat from Godfrey's Fish Camp in Edgewater and struck out into the unknown of Mosquito Lagoon, I have nearly killed myself several times and brought several of my friends to the brink of disaster as well.
Oh.
True stories. All these are true. Through it all, I have caught tons of fish and had lots of fun. In these pages, I have tried to recount some of the good times and some of the mishaps that have brought me to this place. Hopefully, hidden in these pages are some pretty good fishing tips as well. Every weathered old salt had to begin someplace. My path may have been a little different from most, but the destination is much the same. If my writing is popular, I'm certain it is because of my boundless enthusiasm. These days, I don't recognize the person in my mirror, but inside I remain the kid who was bold enough to challenge the bull that was trying to keep him from fishing. There's a story in here about that, when I was a wee kid, I went to a farmer's pond, sneaked into his field, not knowing there was a big bull in there.
Oh, no.
And the bull and I had a confrontation.
Uh-oh.
It is clear to my readers that I am not a great constructor of prose or a particularly articulate wordsmith. No, instead I'm a storyteller, weaving tales in a manner that is simple to read and easy to understand. I don't waste many words and am direct and to the point. As I relive my misadventures here, some may think them untrue. I can understand that. My full life, however, has afforded me so many memories that my biggest problem was choosing which to exclude in this book. All of my stories are painfully true, and I hope you enjoy the retelling as much as I did the living.
Yeah. All right. So let's find out a little bit more about you.
Okay.
You came here from Chicago, was it?
Well, in a roundabout way, I was raised in the swamps of Louisiana,
Okay.
in the Cajun country, and fished from the time I was big enough to hold a rod and reel. But in my working life, I did work in Chicago area, and I bought a house here. I wound up here, came here to see the race in 1968, and wound up liking it. And I said, this place has cars, it has plenty of water, this is my new home. And eventually I met a young lady from New Jersey whose family had moved down from New Jersey. And we married and bought a house, but I continued to work in Chicago. For 26 years I was a snowbird. And but each winter, my work would allow me at least 3 months of downtime in the winter. And I fished hard. I fished Volusia County and a lot of the state. I went around the state too, but I fished very. The first date when I met my wife Lana, the first date I took her on was fishing. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later people said, that's not the way you could take a girl on a first date. I said, I just thought I was going fishing. I thought she wanted to come along. But yeah, I became a resident in 90, a full-time resident, and semi-retired, and began fishing even more. And then the hometown news started up, like I said, close to 15 years now, and I began writing the fishing column for them. And then a few years later, they asked me to do an opinion column, and I do an opinion column. And so I do 2 columns a week for the hometown news. And I still fish the state. This summer, I was on the West Coast for the scallop season, and then I was in South Florida for lobster season. I try to catch those things as much as I can. I'm still able to do it. But over the years, I've fished a lot of the state, and I've enjoyed myself in Volusia County. You don't have to go much further than Volusia County. Great fishing right here, world-class fishing in Volusia County. Redfish, trout, flounders, snook, and tarpon that are world-renowned. People come here from all over the world. It's a big industry.
No, I take it you prefer saltwater fishing over
I do,
freshwater?
but I fish freshwater some too. When I came here, because I came from Louisiana, when I came here, I was mostly a freshwater fisherman, and I began right away at the St. John's on the western end of Volusia County. And I did okay, but I found out soon that the real fishing was in the Mosquito Lagoon area and over in the Halifax and Indian Rivers. And I began doing that, and I can't help myself. I'm hooked on fishing, and I'll always be a fisherman. And luckily now I have grandchildren who I've taught to fish, and they're going at it, and they're getting pretty good at it. So, but no, it's been a long road, but I've enjoyed it, and I've had a lot of fun. Anyone that wants to fish, you don't have to go any further than Volusia County.
It's a great county.
Yes, it is.
Now, your book, I Swear the Snook Drowned, is that mostly a compilation of columns, or is it a mixture?
No, what it is when I write my fishing column, I try to relate recent trips that I have taken and the results. And in doing that, I try to give fishing tips on what I used, how I did it, where I went, what the tide was like, what the weather was like. And I try to give people help so that they can get out and enjoy the wildlife a little bit. Most of the stories, there's a few columns in here, but most of the stories in this book are adventures, like the right whale attacking me.
Right.
that didn't seem quite right for the fishing column.
Right.
But were fun stories nonetheless. I thought fun stories nonetheless. And the very first story in the book is about a trip my cousin and I took in a rowboat down below Dunlawton. And in those days, this was a long time ago, in those days there were not a lot, but several people made their home out in the swamp and in the mangroves and lived sort of a hermit life. And there was a fellow just below the Dunlawton Bridge in that tangle of mangroves that you see as you drive across the bridge, who lived an isolated life. He had no boat. The only way he could get there was swim, wade and swim. And we were on this is the first paragraph, chapter, in the book. my cousin and I were back in the mangroves exploring to fish. And we came upon this little shack, and we believed it to be storage of some sort. But when we drew closer, we called him the Red Man. He was he was parched from the sun, and he came out, not a stitch of clothing on, screaming and cursing and giving. He didn't want anyone around his place, and we made a hasty retreat, I guarantee you. But we saw him for years. It turned out we found a good fishing hole in that area, and we'd go back all the time. And he lived out his life and eventually passed away there. But interesting fellow. You couldn't talk to him. He didn't want you anywhere near his place. The funny part about it was where he lived. He had built a shed atop an oyster bar that actually submerged on high tide. And not too far away was a beautiful island with palm trees and some other cover and high banks where the water wouldn't get into it, and nice open under the trees where you could walk around. Perfect place to live. But see, that was too accessible for him. He didn't want to live there. His whole purpose was to get away from people. And after I had intruded in his space, I felt sorry for it, because I realized then after a while what he was doing. And I used to go around him whenever I could. I try not to bother the fellow. But there was, in the length of the Indian River and the Halifax, there were several people back in those days, in the late 70s, early 80s, who made their home. It was free. You could go out there and live without electricity, without running water. And they just made their home out in the swamps. As time passed, I became a supervisor for the census, and when it was time to go search for those people, I wanted to do that myself, so I took my boat and went searching them and
Wow.
counted them for the census.
Did you count him?
Yes, I counted him too.
Good.
He was a cantankerous old fellow, but I came to admire him. After he passed away, I went into his little shack, and I felt like an interloper, an intruder, which I was. He subsisted mostly. He didn't eat the seafood. He didn't eat the oysters, on supplements. He had all sorts of little apothecary bottles with supplements and things that he left behind. Interesting fellow, but not a stitch of clothes. He wasn't expecting company. He wasn't ready for company.
Right.
You know?
I'm sure that helped scare people away.
Yes. Well, as I said when I wrote it in this book, we were in a little tiny 10-foot rowboat, and my cousin and I were both big guys, both ex-military, not afraid of much. But boy, when he jumped out of it. We weren't expecting anyone to be there. It wasn't a place for someone to live. When he jumped out and started cursing and waving his arms, boy, we got out of there as quickly as we could. It's funny what you would find. But most of those people are gone now. You don't see many people living out in the swamp anymore the way it used to be. There's still a few that have a little houseboat or something, but there used to be people that just dropped out of society and went out there to live, and he was one of them. He was. I never did know his name, but I was sorry when he passed.
Yeah.
Because I came to, as we grow up and we take on responsibility and bills start coming and you have things to do, you start to see a little bit of what he was trying to avoid. And I could commiserate with him a little bit, you know. Yeah. I could understand it later on.
That's a great story too.
Yeah.
Now, it's been a while since you had written this book.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll write a second one with more fish tales and adventures?
I should. I've never written one with really, like you asked me to begin with. I've never written one with just a book of fishing instruction.
Right.
I should write an instructional book.
I think you should.
I'm getting older, and people like me that have devoted a lifetime to this stuff, they're passing, and there's not many left. I've been writing about fishing longer than most people have fished. I've been writing about fishing for nearly 15 years, and began as a little kid in Louisiana. And you can't help but gain a lot of information over time like that. And I should put my idea of how to do it, what to use, and so forth. I try to do that on a weekly basis in the newspaper, but it would be good. It would be good to make sure it's left behind and that people could get the benefit of it long after I'm gone.
It would be, and I'm sure you would include some of your humor in
I
that as well.
can't help
I hope
myself.
so.
I can't help myself. I do. But fishing has been a way of life, and as it says on the back of the book, laugh along with Dan as he relives some of his most exciting fishing trips, and I list some of them. But it's meant to be lighthearted and humorous, and I think I pulled that off. And there's some pretty good stories for men and women alike, and children, and you can read it and get some fishing tips and be entertained at the same time. I hope that was my.
Right. I think it's a great book. If you're interested in the book, come to Volusia County Public Library. You can check one out or contact Dan at the Hometown News, and he'll let you know how you can buy one.
Yep, if you will, my email is fishwithdan, FISHW Dan, @att.net. And if you would like a personalized copy, I would be happy to mail it to you.
Well, thank you, Dan, for coming today to talk about your book.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. It was fun.
I enjoy your column very
Good.
much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.